Welcome back, everybody. Trevor Lane. You can follow me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane, joined by Keith Smith. You can find him at Keith Smith NBA. We're going to do a Twitter mailbag of sorts here. Keith threw the question out there on Twitter asking if anybody had any questions they want us to discuss on the show, and we got a lot. So we're going to break down some of your questions, touch upon a lot of topics here. Keith, I'm glad that there's already so many questions about the NBA, the salary cap, trade possibilities, all that kind of stuff, even though we are here only, about 25% of the way into the season.
Yeah, no, this is great. And I mean, love, our Twitter followers out there who jump in and start asking a bunch of questions. And the nice thing was they're not all Celtics and Lakers related.
Right.
There are Celtics and Lakers related questions, of course, but they're not all of them. So I think we got some fun ones. So go ahead, pick one. You pick first, and then we'll just kind of go, guys. We were doing this completely off the cuff. This was not prepared or anything. So we don't have stats and all this other stuff prepared to back it up, but we'll do our best.
All right, let's go with this. Let's throw something in here for let's throw you a Celtics question to start. We've got a question here from Smiley Jogger Rita, who said, "Hi guys, what if any are realistic paths that the Celtics could keep Dennis Schroder for the entire season and re-sign him next year?" Again, the Celtics got Schroder on a pretty nice contract when he couldn't find any other options out there. The big money wasn't there. Turned down that 4 years, $84 million from the Lakers, and now he found himself in a tough spot in free agency where the money just kind of dried up. So the Celtics got him on, I believe it was the mid-level. So what do you think? Does he stay a Celtic throughout the entire year, meaning they don't use him in a trade? And then what are their options to bring him back should they decide that he's a long-term piece for them?
Yeah, so let me start by saying Rita was the one, if you listened to
who was covering me up
earlier. Yeah, she was the one who blocks Trevor's half of the show and only looks at me. So Rita is apparently a long lost relation of mine, which I appreciate. But no, great fan of ours. So yeah, the Schroeder question is really one that a ton of people are asking because it's funny because some are, what could we trade him for? Because I think they understand it's going to be hard to re-sign him. There's some who are, what can we trade him for? Because they don't like the way he plays, which I know you are quite familiar with. And then there are some who think he's great and want to re-sign him at all costs. So $5.89 million this year. You are absolutely correct. He got the taxpayer mid-level exception, or as it's commonly called, the mini mid-level. But the challenge is it was a 1-year deal. So the Celtics have him with no form of bird rights next year. So the max Boston can offer him without going into any other kind of exception is about $7.1 million. So here becomes your challenge with Dennis Schroeder is this year. There are some who are going to look at it and say, well, he only got 5.9 this year, should be happy to get $7 million next year. That's not exactly how it works. By the time everything kind of had fallen out for Schroeder, the Lakers had traded for Russell Westbrook. His market had just completely dried up. There were no point guard spots left. Boston had the only path to minutes and playing time and more than slightly above minimum contract. So the chances of re-signing him probably fairly slim unless it goes the same way again next offseason, where for some reason he gets squeezed. If he plays well enough, it shouldn't go that way. Somebody should be willing to throw him at least their full mid-level.
And it's a thin free agent class too. Like that's going to matter.
Extremely thin free agent class. So that is a great point by you. I've not done free agent rankings. We will do those, of course, at some point later, but it's not good. These are some of the other guys who he'd be kind of competing with out there. So he's clearly behind someone like Jalen Brunson, who teams really, really like, but it's guys like Ricky Rubio, Goran Dragic, Tyus Jones, maybe Kendrick Nunn. Let's see what happens there. Colin Sexton on the restricted market, Lou Williams, DeLon Wright. So it's point guard, maybe one of the better positions on the market too, which doesn't help him because they're all kind of fighting. But as we talked about at the time he was signed, there was just not a lot of teams looking for point guards. The same thing we've talked about with, like player getting traded, X, Y, and Z, and all those kind of things. So difficult for the Celtics to keep him. Now the other option would be if he wanted to resign for that 7 million, then they'd have early bird rights on him. That opens up some different things that they could do as far as trades go and the like there. But yeah, well, we'll see ultimately where this goes. Trade possibilities, maybe, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. Let's see where the Celtics are come trade deadline. If they're kind of still floating around as a middling team around 500, maybe you do look to cash in and say, it's really not going to get any worse to give those backup point guard minutes to Peyton Pritchard the rest of the way. So let's do that. But as of right now, my guess is he plays out the rest of the year, and then it's kind of let's see what comes in July.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Can't argue with any of that. Another question coming in from Anton76, Sixers Menace. Would the Spurs Sixers do a DeJounte Murray Ben Simmons swap straight up today? I would have
Well, they
to.
couldn't. It doesn't work.
I was gonna say the math doesn't work, but even like
Yeah.
I feel like the Sixers are looking for like I like DeJounte Murray a lot, but I don't think that's exactly what the 76ers are looking for in the Ben Simmons trade market.
Yeah, that's your challenge. I think if you're the Spurs, you're maybe more willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that the Spurs necessarily would jump at that. It's this is where I struggle with these kind of things because me, I'm so hyper realistic with the cap,
Mm-hmm.
so I can't kind of divorce myself from the cap rules on this. But yeah, I would think straight up that would make some sense for both teams because if you're the Spurs, you just basically slide everybody down a position and
Yeah.
put Ben Simmons in at the 4. Keldon Johnson, becomes your 2-3. You could put Derek White on the ball on the point, and then put like Lonnie Walker in at the 2 or something like that. The Spurs have a lot of guard depth, and that's before you even get into guys like Devin Vassell, Joshua Primo, and those kind of guys. So it's interesting to think about DeJounte Murray though. Let's just talk about him for a second. Having a really really good year,
Yeah.
for San Antonio. He's now kind of I think fully figured out like I just got to get to that floater in the paint, and that thing is money. I mean, he basically beat I think it was the Wizards last night just by getting into the paint over and over and over again. And he's awesome defensively.
Which is probably why we're getting this question today about
Yeah,
potentially
probably.
trading for him. But
Yeah.
speaking of the Wizards, here we've got another question coming in from at J Green 6293. Said, what are the chances the Wizards still tweak and add an off the bench shooting guard?
Yeah, I like questions like this because this is kind of open ended.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you a chance to look at some things. So here's the cool thing: if you're the Wizards, they've got a whole bunch of salaries that they could put together to get really kind of interesting. Let's say the Kings fall out of it and they were like, all right, we're gonna move Buddy Hield.
Yep.
They can get there pretty easily without sending just a bunch of bad money back to the Kings. And I promise I'm not doing this to kind of twist the knife on you or needle you, but it would be kind of funny if the Wizards ended up with the Lakers package of guys they traded for Russ and Buddy Hield.
And Buddy Hield, right?
That just occurred to me, but I go to Buddy Hield for shooter who could be available almost instantaneously, right? Because of the situation there. But the point I wanted to make is so you could do something like Thomas Bryant's 8.7 million,
Mm-hmm.
put that with maybe a guy like Rui Hachimura, and then you're getting close to there. On the match, you probably got to throw in one or two more guys going back the Kings way. But yeah, I like that kind of identified need for this
Mm-hmm.
team because that's what they don't have. They're kind of backup guards when everybody's healthy have been Aaron Holiday and Raul Neto, and Neto kind of defaults into that backup 2 guard role behind Bradley Beal. Now, what you got to be careful of is you don't want to overpay for somebody
Right.
to just be Beal's true backup because come playoff time, that's 10 minutes a night. And that's not you don't want to spend a whole bunch of trade capital to go get somebody to play 10 minutes a night. You have to get somebody who can play alongside Beal too. So that's where maybe someone like Hield's not necessarily perfect because I don't know in the playoffs how much mileage you could get out of Bradley Beal and Buddy Hield playing together.
That's a good point. Yeah, if it come playoff time, and I mean, amazing that here we are talking about the Wizards as like a definite playoff team, but that's what they've been so far. But come playoff time, you're right. If Bradley Beal is playing 36 to 40 minutes a night, and you've got a guy who's only his backup, do you really want to give up what you need to in order to get somebody who's going to play maybe 8 minutes? Probably
Yeah.
not. So you need to have somebody with a little bit more versatility than that. But I do think it would be a good target for the Wizards in terms of just positionally something to add to this team in order to kind of give them
Yep.
that little bit of extra boost. I do think a backup shooting guard would be the way to go. Buddy Hield is an intriguing option. I'm sure as we get closer to the trade deadline, some more will become apparent as teams kind of things sort of settle in terms of the standings, and we start to figure out who's actually sellers and who's buyers in the trade market.
Yeah, I could see them being a player if they wanted to give up a pick
Mm-hmm.
in a deal for a guy like maybe Terrence Ross from the
Sure.
Magic.
Yep.
I think that's a guy again easy to get there salary matching wise for a guy like Terrence Ross. The assumption is that Ross will eventually get moved as a veteran there. Gary Harris probably a little too expensive, and then you're talking about how much you're giving up for Gary Harris, but Ross is also a guy too you could then re-sign down the line and make it work that way. So, yeah, good question though.
I've got at second Pressman said, will the Lakers make a coaching change? So the Lakers, I mean, the drumbeat has been growing louder for Frank Vogel to move on, but that's what happens when a team is not having the success that they were expected to have. That you start to hear calls for the coach to get changed out because that's frankly, that's probably the easiest thing to do
Yep.
is to change out the coach before you start trading away players and things of that nature. And you can also argue that the Lakers don't have many trade chips, so the trade possibilities for them probably aren't as strong as they are for some other teams. So if you're going to change anything, it might be your only thing that you can really change on this roster as the head coach. I think it does depend on what they do over the next, say, 10, 15 games. I think it would have gotten interesting. We don't have a sense of exactly what the front office is thinking, but if the Lakers dropped their last game to the Pistons after falling in triple overtime to the Kings, you can only imagine how loud those cries for Vogel to be out would
Yeah.
be at this point. But I think it's going to depend on how things go over the next few weeks, particularly once the team gets healthy. He's talked a lot about Trevor Ariza being a big key to playing the way that he wants to play. And so I'd have to imagine this is me guessing, but if I'm the Lakers front office, I'm probably waiting to see what that looks like and then going from there.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of key point. I guess the next place I'd be looking is that Christmas game with the Nets.
Sure.
Let's say they come out of that and they are still 500 or worse, then I think that just tends to be a point where it's like, all right, we got to do something before this season just gets away from us. And at that point, it is to ask to kind of answer another question we got is like, will the Lakers make a big trade? With what?
Yeah,
There's nothing to make a big trade with.
you're right.
It just, and I'm not being, snippy Celtics fan here. There just isn't. They
The
used all of that to go get Russell Westbrook.
the best
It
you've
doesn't make
got in
sense.
terms of salary matching is combining Taylor Horton Tucker and Kendrick Nunn. And Kendrick Nunn hasn't played this season. We're 21
Yep.
games in, and he hasn't played 22 games in now. And he hasn't
Yep.
played. He's still a ways away dealing with this bone bruise. So there's salary there, but a little bit, and not a
Yeah.
ton of value really to offer up. So the chances of them making a big trade are slim.
No, and we got a question about will they trade Westbrook? The answer is
No.
no, that's not going to
Nope.
happen. That's also completely admitting failure
Hmm.
and saying like we blew that. Now you can go into the offseason and say, hey, we gave it a year, we realized it didn't fit, but to do that by the deadline, that's not going to
No.
happen. So why I say Christmas is it kind of is almost like an artificial milestone, I guess, for
Okay.
teams a little bit of, all right, let's look at where we are. They can kind of approach it as, all right, Frank Vogel is gone. We bump up, whether it be David Fizdale, Phil Handy, whoever it is, to the lead seat. They're going to be the guy who takes over, and now we're going to do X, Y, and Z moving forward, and that's how we're gonna finish this season strong. That's why I think, yeah, if they're 500 or worse, come that point, it's definitely possible. Now, there's a lot of winnable games in
Yeah.
there. They have a stretch where they're at Memphis without John Morant, likely still at that point, at Oklahoma City versus Orlando. That's three. You should go 3-0
Right.
at that stretch if you're Lakers. And then at Dallas, at Minnesota, at Chicago. It's kind of a tough road trip, right? Minnesota's playing better. Chicago's pretty good. Then versus Phoenix, then versus San Antonio. Phoenix clearly one of the best teams in the NBA, and then San Antonio. It just seems like Lakers and Spurs, it's always a battle,
Yeah.
no matter what. And then you have the Nets on Christmas. So Yeah, it's possible they're still kind of floating around that 500 range. And as you said, you can't trade everybody, and you can't change all the players. So the easy decision kind of becomes at that point of, whether it's the right decision or not, ultimately becomes someone's going to be held accountable. It's probably going to be the coach, and
Right.
that would be my guess. Because yeah, I don't see anything big coming, and I don't know too. I wouldn't be looking at the buyout market as like, here we go, where we're going to get all this help there. I just don't know what's going to be there.
Yeah, we have no idea who's getting bought out. I know people bring up Kevin Love a lot, but who knows what that situation is going to look like, or if he's
Not
even
as long as
really.
they keep playing well too. I mean, he
Yeah.
seems happy there. They're happy. So yeah, I don't think we're going to see that either.
So we'll see if Frank Vogel gets a lump of coal in his stocking or not on Christmas. I've got a question coming in here about the Mavs. Luke Byrne from YouTube, or from Twitter, said Dallas is getting killed in the paint night to night. What
Yeah.
center could they realistically trade for or move on from players like Powell, Willie Cauley-Stein, etc. for?
Yeah. Now, this is where I'm glad he added that second part in there, because this is where it can get a little bit interesting, because you could do Cauley Stein and Powell. That's about $15 million.
Mm-hmm.
Powell has one more year left at $11 million, but that's not horrible. That's, enough where you can make that work in a trade. And that's before you get into any kind of your more core rotation guys. So then it becomes, all right, so that's $15 million. Who's a $15 million center that you can go get? Or just somebody who can help?
Mm-hmm.
I think the number one target that teams looking for center help that's going to be out there, everybody's going to be looking at, is Robin Lopez
Yeah.
on the Magic, because he's doesn't play on any sort of regular basis, because they've really kind of settled into Bamba, Carter together. Eventually, Jonathan Isaac's going to come back, which means one of Bamba and Carter is going to go to the bench. So you're going to end up with, that's going to kind of be your three big rotation at that point, is going to be those three guys, because by then Mo Wagner will be out of the rotation, and all those things. So there's just not a lot of room for Lopez. He's only making $5 million, so very easily tradable salary, and it's $5 million for just this season.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they could go get him pretty. I mean, that's Cauley Stein in a second rounder. Probably get you Robin Lopez, if you wanted to go that route.
Yep.
There, kind of looking at bad teams. There's just not that many bad teams. Yes, if they really wanted to spend money, you would get Derek Favors. That's a guy who could
Sure.
come in. Kelly Olynyk's going to be a guy who's going to be interesting. And problem is he's hurt. Now, if they wanted to go big, they could try to do something for Miles Turner. If you wanted to go that direction, go a little bit heavier, go, there's your salary matches, Powell and Cauley Stein,
And then
and
you're
you're
to
probably
put in,
having to give up a pick,
yeah, at
to
least
go get them. But yeah, and then maybe that's the way you go, is you go that direction.
the length of a Turner Porzingis front line is a little bit ridiculous, but
The sad part is they're tall and long, but
yeah.
that'd be one of the worst rebounding
Yes.
big man pairs in the league, because neither one of them can rebound for crap considering how big they are.
Well, and that's what kind of the question was. They're getting killed they're getting killed in the paint. I'm assuming he's talking about on the boards as well. But just in terms of rim protection, though, I mean, Miles Turner's leading the NBA in shot blocking, which, I mean, shot blocks is not always a direct translation to rim protection, but it obviously it does matter. So maybe that's a target there, but
I'm not the biggest Miles Turner fan in the world. I never really have been, because I think he's better in theory than what he's been in actuality. There's a sense of this rim protecting shooting five, and his shooting's always just kind of been okay. It's never really been all that good. But Miles Turner is a good shot blocker, and he's not somebody. Remember a few years back when it was like Sam Whiteside's averaging 3-something blocks per game, but it was like, yeah, because he's chasing blocks. He's trying to get block every shot, and he's leaving the backside wide open, and teams were just burning him repeatedly once they realized, like, oh, he's going to bite on everything because he just wants to block shots. Here's another name I'll throw out there, because Kevin O'Connor, the Ringer, had this today, and it's something I've heard.
This is where I was going next. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Christian Wood's going to be probably Lopez is your bargain basement big man that everybody can acquire, because he only makes $5 million. Wood only makes $13.6 million. He's really good. I mean, he's playing out of his mind right now. So he's going to be somebody that every team, if the Rockets do decide to trade him, it's a weird spot though for the Rockets, because he's still young enough to be a part of like whatever's next, to be a
Right.
big part of whatever next good team they have is. But as a couple people pointed out to me on Twitter today, is do you really want to be the team that's going to give him 20 million in a couple seasons when he's now in his late 20s and moving on, like, and all that stuff? I don't have a problem with that because good bigs still get paid in the league. It's just kind of how it works. And sometimes I'll even say more often than not, I do think it ends up kind of okay. But yeah, he's going to be a guy that everybody's going to be pushing for. And if you wanted to go kind of split the difference between Wood and Lopez salary wise, Daniel Tice
That
is
was my next
somebody
one.
who teams will look at too, because he's about 8.3 million. So
Keith, you hit both guys that I was going to go to next. I had this whole thing planned out where I'm going to say the Mavs need to drive a few hours south and they need to go talk about Christian Wood, and if not, they need to go to Daniel Tice. So I'm glad that we're on the same wavelength with
as
all
per
of that.
usual.
So. All right, let's. This is an interesting one. This question here, Big Brawler from Twitter obviously said, teams posed to make the biggest trade by the deadline. Which teams make a run at certain players? I mean, so when we look at this, we typically are looking for teams that are like on the cusp of being either a playoff team or a true contender and would feel like they need just a little boost to get to that next level. So I'm looking at this, trying to think about who
I'm pulling up the standings.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing too.
Help.
I mean, the Wizards, who we brought up before, probably wouldn't be a bad name to throw in there. Currently sitting in the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, I think.
Dallas, who somebody just asked about.
Yes, Dallas as well. I do wonder. I mean, the Clippers are sitting in the 5 seed right now. They're waiting for a return by Kawhi Leonard if he does come back this season. What about the Wolves, currently sitting in the 6th seed? You'd have to imagine there's some incentive for them to finally make the playoffs.
Definitely. Yeah. Especially with new ownership group, right? They want to be
for sure
a good team. Yeah.
So what about them to potentially make a big move? And then what do they have to trade if they are going to make that move?
Yeah, so I don't think you see them do something that involves Russell or Towns.
Right.
Clearly, Anthony Edwards is not going to be traded. So that leaves you kind of looking at, do they have a couple contracts you can stack? Oh, boy, do they. You got Malik Beasley at about $14.5 million. You got Patrick Beverley at $14.3 million. You got Taurean Prince at $13 million. Even if you went a little lower into the roster, just to kind of start adding things up. Jared Vanderbilt, $4 million. Jake Layman, $3.9 million. So they can get there. They can put themselves in the conversation for anybody as far as matching salary, because you don't have to touch Russell or Towns in their $30 million contracts. You could still have those two guys as kind of your backbone, along with Edwards, of course, and you can still get there matching salary-wise. Their challenge it becomes the age-old question is, who are you going to get that's going to lift you beyond being just a one-time playoff team?
Right.
Because if you're only going to get to the playoffs once, is it worth trading away a bunch of guys and picks or whatever? I continue to believe that's the best fit for Ben Simmons. I'm probably not going to move off that at any point, at any time there. I do wonder if maybe does Philly look at it at some point and say, all right, you know what? Picks, Taurean Prince and Malik Beasley, not the worst package in the world we could get. Let's go. Let's do this. Let's just kind of flesh out our depth a little bit there. That kind of answers the question from the Philly side, right? Philly's going to be the team that will sit here because they have the piece to go make a big move in a Simmons trade. But as you look at the standings, what does Cleveland do? Does Cleveland say, you know what, we're really close. Let's try to go get somebody else.
True.
And they really make a run at being a playoff team again. Again, same question I would ask is this going to make you a multi-year playoff team, or you're going to be a one-time playoff team? That's where it gets kind of concerning on that end. Let me flip it though.
Yeah.
Does a team like Denver, if they continue to struggle, do they sell a couple players? Like, do they look and say, all right, you know what, not exactly where we want to be? Do we look to move, someone like Will Barton? Do we look to, maybe it's really, I guess they're not a great example because you're not going to trade Gordon, Porter, Jokic, or Murray. So, right. But, Monte Morris, could we get something where he could really help a team? Their veteran, bench what should have been bench bigs, Jermichael Green and Jeff Green. Just is that something they look to do there? But yeah, it's more right now instead of like actual targets for teams, because that part's hard to know because we're still, I mean, gosh, we're still over 2 months from the trade deadline. It's
Our
more what teams could you see?
our suggestion or our topic from yesterday, where we talked a little bit about the Nuggets and whether or not they would tank, was not well received
No.
by Nuggets fans at
Yep.
all. Which again, no surprise or anything. But the argument, the flip side to, well, okay, everybody's hurt. Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, right? They've got all these injuries that they've been dealing with. Maybe this becomes their San Antonio Spurs year that they got
Golden
Tim
State
Duncan.
Warriors.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
but the flip side is, of course, they have Nikola Jokic, and so that's the
Yeah.
challenge. Like, do you sell pieces when you've got the reigning MVP on your team? And I know he's been dealing with injuries as well.
Yep.
So they're not going to do that right now. It depends on what happens over the next month, probably. We'll see what happens with them injury wise. But then, if you look at some other teams, there are some sellers out there, like New Orleans is probably going to have to be a seller unless Zion really sparks them. Houston will be.
That's it.
And that's, you've got some teams out there that'll be willing to sell guys. The question is, what's the price? You mentioned Terrence Ross earlier for the Orlando Magic.
Yep.
He could easily get moved. There'll be guys out there. But the question is, which teams are going to be convinced that, hey, this is the guy that's going to really put us over the top, and maybe not even this season, but for the future.
Yeah, because not to beat this dead horse anymore, but unless you're really saying this is a guy who puts us over the top to try and win a title, those are questions Golden State, Phoenix, Utah, Brooklyn need to be asking themselves. Miami. The rest of the teams is this really going to help us get to the playoffs? For sure. The play-in changes this so much too, because if you're Sacramento, is just getting into the play-in enough for this year? Is that okay? If you're Denver, to kind of go back to that, or you're Portland, is it time to say, being in the play-in, that's nothing for us. So let's move on from stuff. Denver's not going to do a full-scale sell-off. That we just went through it. There just isn't the guys. Portland could, though. If Neil O'Shea got fired, maybe Portland comes back and says, new GM says, all right,
trade
hey, man, yeah, I've been sitting here playing with the trade machine, brother. I'm ready to go. Let's, off we go nuts with, breaking up this team that everybody has, fake broken up 4,000 times on every corner of the internet. So yeah, maybe that's the direction there. If you're the Clippers, and let's say you're the Clippers and you kind of internally know, hey, we're going to get Kawhi back. He's going to play. Do you try and go get somebody and add a piece, in the year? So yeah, that's now again, all that stuff's it's a little early for those conversations here. Trade market kind of unofficially will open in about 2 weeks, December 15th, when players who were signed over the summer can be traded. But yeah, one other team I'm going to throw out just because we know they want to get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
And they need to add the Charlotte Hornets. They need to add big man help, and they need to add any form of interior defense, because their defense overall stinks, but their interior defense is absolutely awful. It is probably the worst that there is in the league. It is really, really bad.
And, plus minus is not a perfect stat or anything like that. Point differential is not a perfect stat. But the Charlotte Hornets right now sitting in the 6th seed, but it is pretty noticeable that they are a minus 0.5, which is not terrible, but a minus 0.5. And the 5 teams below them are all in the positive right now in terms of point differential. So that would suggest that maybe they're playing a little bit above their head, or at least they're slotted a little bit above their head in terms of the table right now. So it's something where you could see them drop, and that might give them a little out of incentive to go ahead and make a move.
And start to look at it too, as far as that starts to speak a little bit to luck.
Yes.
You've definitely had some and then look at the Indiana Pacers. They're 9-14, but are plus 1.3 in point differential, and they're sitting in 13th in the East. They're 3 full games out of just making it to the play-in. So that's where it does kind of start to sit and look at and say, all right, where are we really at as we start to evaluate our teams here. But yeah, it's little early. Well, one thing, just because I know we're both looking at the standings page. Oh, here come the Bucks.
They're quietly, because the Suns are on a 16-game win streak. The Bucks are quietly on a 7-game win streak, and
the Bucks are only a game and a half behind the Nets for the top seed now.
Yeah,
so,
here they
I
come.
will also say, on behalf of Eastern Conference basketball fans, when are we going to fix this? Western Conference teams with 500 or losing records being playoff teams, while these poor East teams with winning records have to fight and
This
battle.
is the first time in like 30 years.
Hey, if it needed fixed that way, it needs fixed the other way too.
Oh my.
No, hey, I had to say it now because
Yeah, you got to get your shots in when you have the opportunity.
Yeah. But yeah, no, we thank everybody for the questions. We wish you
Yes.
could have got to more, but I've got to run off to a middle school soccer game. Trevor's got Lakers stuff to do, so we'll do this again. Though we'll try to do this somewhat regularly, or we've talked about doing a live YouTube show where you guys can just come in and ask questions there as well. Those are a little harder to time because. Well, maybe we should do them in the middle of the workday. I know when I worked an office job, I didn't mind having
It's a
something.
nice little distraction.
Yeah. If I was running out the clock on the day. But yeah, thanks to everybody who threw questions in there. We'll get to more of those next time around when we do this.
Absolutely. We did get a question here from Rob Fritz saying which slow start by a player or team is the most concerning. We're going to do a whole show on that pretty soon here. Knocking out our most surprising in a good way and most surprising in a bad way, our most concerning team as well. So that's going to be coming up. Don't worry about that. We will get to that question.
Yeah, we didn't skip you on purpose, Rob.
Nope.
We will answer your question. Your question's getting a full show.
That's right.
Think of it that way.
Extra special. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Make sure you do subscribe to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications as well. Till next time. See ya and stay.